Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ali Rock. Jason Amsel is an intellectual property attorney, entrepreneur, and startup advisor. Prior to founding Amsel IP Law, Jason spent 15 years at a large Silicon Valley law firm working with technology startup companies. Throughout his career, Jason has drafted and prosecuted thousands of patent applications for companies ranging from early-stage startups to large public companies. In today's podcast, Jason discusses his legal journey from when he did his undergrad degree in electrical and computer engineering at Cornell to working in big law for 15 years to eventually opening his own IP firm in Austin, Texas. Hey, Jason, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Happy to be here. Good to see you.
You too. Super excited to talk about your experience in big law as a patent attorney and then talk about opening your own firm, Amsel IP Law, and sort of learn about the challenges and benefits of running your own firm. So I'd love to start with an icebreaker. My first question is, you spent a lot of time in the Bay Area and in Texas. So which do you prefer, Austin or Mountain View?
Well, the easy answer is that I prefer Austin, but I had a lot to like about the Bay Area as well. It was certainly a great place to start off my career. Obviously, being in a tech focused industry, there's it's a center of everything in the tech world. So it was a great place to be for tech, for startups, and I really enjoyed my time there. And now I'm really enjoying my time in Austin as well.
That's awesome. And second question is, if you could do any other profession and money was not an issue, what would it be?
Interesting question. Well, I really like making money, so it's kind of a hard question since that drives a lot of my has driven a lot of my career decisions. Um, I kind of would like to just be like a. Have you seen the show Yellowstone? Like I would like to just be like a landowner that just if that's a career. It is for some people, I think, if you have enough land that you just sort of, make money off of your land. You raise cattle, you farm, do whatever. Um, that sounds great to me.
That's awesome. I have not seen that show, but that sounds like a pretty awesome and laid back lifestyle, I want to say.
It's pretty much the opposite of what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. Well, cool. I'd love to just start with a brief sort of history about how you even got interested in law. So maybe we could talk about your time at Cornell, and then you could talk about how you ended up actually attending Berkeley Law after getting your master's at Cornell.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So I went into Cornell and my whole time there in the engineering school. And so my plan the entire time that I was in college was that I was going to be an engineer. And so I majored in electrical and computer engineering. That was my focus. Never thought about going into law, going to law school, any of that. I did some internships in the engineering field. That brought me from New York, where Cornell is, to Silicon Valley. So that was kind of my first Silicon Valley experience. But I was still set on being an engineer. I actually went back to Cornell and did a master's degree in engineering. And that's when I started to just feel a little bit jaded about going into engineering. And, maybe it was just that I was working really hard in school and trying to get through the program, and mentally felt like I needed a break from it. But I'd interviewed, for jobs with a lot of engineering companies, and just it didn't excite me as much as I thought it would when I was going into the program. And so I still very much wanted to be focused in the tech industry. I had done internships in Silicon Valley area and was interested in going back there. But I started to explore a bit what other career paths someone with an engineering degree could take. And so I had looked at some more business oriented career paths, and I sort of stumbled across patent law. There was actually some law firms that were recruiting on campus at Cornell, and I was just interested in figuring out why they were there and what they were doing at the engineering school. And so I talked to a few of those law firms, and it sounded really interesting to me. And so, they were hiring engineers right out of engineering school to join engineering departments. And what I learned was that, in the patent world, it is very tech focused. Everyone who works in patent law has a technical background, and you're working very closely with engineers. And so that was really interesting to me. It felt like it would use my technical background, but also offer quite a different perspective on technology than working as an engineer. And so I like the idea of potentially working with a lot of different companies, working with a lot of different technologies. In the patent law, you're always sort of at the cutting edge of technology because you're seeing all of the latest and greatest, newest things really before anyone else does. That was all exciting to me, and I ended up getting an offer from a firm based in Silicon Valley, and so I took it, kind of not knowing exactly what I was getting myself into, but it sounded like a nice change of pace, and was happy to go back to Silicon Valley, and so that's really how it started. And I was there for a few years as an engineer, and so that was a great experience because I was able to really get a taste of what being a patent lawyer was like before making any sort of commitment to go to law school. So it was really only after a few years of doing that that I decided that I wanted to stick with it. Decided to head off to law school and did that at Berkeley.
That's awesome. And was it before or after you got your master's degree that you sort of made that decision?
It was really while I was in the process of getting my master's degree. I think that's where I started to get a bit burnt out on engineering. It was also, you know, post the dot com bubble bursting. So it was a while after. So it was, things were the technology industry had come back, and it was still fairly strong, but um, it wasn't like it was when I had first started in the engineering program at Cornell. So things had changed a bit. And, I think it was doing the internship in engineering and going back into the master's program and just sort of getting interested in, well, what else might I do with this degree that led me there?
I'm curious, and this is sort of a broad question, but not a lot of people have both a JD and a master's. So I guess just objectively speaking, like I know it's apples and oranges, but how is the difficulty of the master's in CS compared to the JD at Berkeley?
So, at risk of offending many law students and legal professionals out there, it wasn't even close for me in terms of getting out of the program. Now, getting into the program is very difficult, um, uh, but for me, doing the master's degree, it was actually in electrical and computer engineering, not computer science. Um, for me, that was orders of magnitude more difficult, and I think that is partly by design. Um, there are a lot of right in the engineering world. There really is a right answer and a wrong answer to most things, and the exams you take in engineering school are primarily types of questions where there is a right answer and there is a wrong answer, and if you better be getting the right answer. Um, in law school, the experience tends to be quite different. Most of your grades are dependent on usually one final exam in many of the classes, or sometimes, a midterm and a final. But many of the classes, and especially the core classes, are very dependent on what is typically a pretty lengthy, several hour long final exam that's primarily essay based and usually framed as questions with no real right or wrong answer. It's very often these hypothetical situations where it would be a case of first impression for a court where um, it's not that the professor is really looking for you to come to answer it in one way or another. They're looking for you to consider all of the various prior decisions and the law and to act like a lawyer would do, which, depending on what side you're on, to come up with arguments that support one position or another. And so, what I found was that you know I didn't feel the pressure to pass the exams that I felt in engineering school, because you kind of know that there is no right or wrong answer, and you can uh, write about, you can approach it in all different ways. Um, and, I think, especially at Berkeley, I mean, the exams are designed to let people pass. There's not a lot of people that are failing, and the grading system is pretty friendly because they don't have letter grades, and so
Yeah.
um, the pressure for me was a bit different.
Yeah, it sounds like it was just a totally different mindset from the engineering side of things. I'd be curious to know for folks that have a STEM degree and maybe they're considering getting their JD, why should or shouldn't they? Or what are some of the considerations to keep in mind? Because you would need a STEM degree specifically for IP, if I'm not mistaken. So, what kind of advice would you give to folks that have that STEM degree that are considering the JD?
Yeah, well, the STEM degree is required primarily for patent prosecution, which is one field of IP. There are other fields of IP that would not require that. So if you focus more on trademarks or copyrights, those areas do not
Soft versus
require.
hard IP, right?
Yeah, and and there are folks that go into patent litigation as well. And so if you focus more on the litigation side, then that STEM degree is also not required, although it certainly can be helpful. Um, and so, that being said, I know quite a few people with STEM degrees that have gone into completely different areas of the law as well. So, you don't necessarily have to go to patent law. I know people that have gone into corporate law, or even areas that are completely unrelated. And I think, in the corporate law field, right, there are attorneys that focus heavily on the tech industry and the startup industry. And so even though they're working on the corporate side of things, um, it's can be a good background to have. But certainly, right, the experience in school is quite different, and so it helps to get out of the mindset of, right, there being kind of rigid sets of rules and right or wrong answers, and you get a lot more open-ended sorts of questions. And I think really the purpose of law school is to help you think like a lawyer.
Got it. Amazing. So, with your permission, I'd love to talk about your time in big law. You joined right before the 2008 financial crisis, well, actually 2 years before. So, I'd love to know what your experience was like during your first years as an associate in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so I joined the firm 2 years before that crisis, but that was as a engineer. So I was not in, the summer classes, the law school summer classes that got those big law summer offers, and then were suddenly dealing with this financial crisis and concern over whether they were going to be uh, getting those offers. So, I went to law school a little bit later, and I knew that I was going back to the same firm, and I was assured that I had a position lined up for me. So I was able to avoid quite a bit of that stress when I came out of law school. But during that whole time, the experience as a junior person was really great. So in my group, in the patent group, as an engineer, you basically get trained like a lawyer. Like, I got the same training that the lawyers were getting in that group, and so you basically learn how to be a patent lawyer. There is a patent bar exam that you can take to become licensed before the U.S. Patent Office, and so I was able to do that, and that does not require a law degree, in fact. So um, that's kind of how I was able to transition in. But at a big firm, I mean, you're going to have amazing clients, working with really interesting tech startups in my case, companies that many times working with them from their very early days, but then you'd see them go through major funding rounds, see things happen with big acquisitions, even a few big IPOs were happening when I was there. So all of that is really exciting. And then the attorneys that you are learning from, of course, are all brilliant people in their fields, really good people to train you. So the training that I got was great. Um, Along with that is there is a lot of billing pressure, which I think people learn very quickly. And so, there's always kind of the stress of making sure that you're going to meet your hours in some cases. Um, and in other cases, you know, it's the work expectations are so high that meeting your hours is not really the issue because you're going to very easily blow past them. And it's more about, can I find some evenings and some weekends off? And so that depends largely on the group and kind of the market and what's going on at the time. And during my time there, I definitely went through different cycles. Some were slower. I was more worried about, you know, how do I make my hours, and others that were so busy that, I would do anything for uh, to take a few days off.
Yeah, got it. And can you maybe describe like what exactly was your day to day as a patent agent?
Yeah. So it changes a lot as you go from being more junior to more senior. But, as a junior person, I was always working closely with either a partner or a senior level associate. And so, a lot of the time is in the patent group is very independent work. And so you're spending a lot of time working on drafting patent applications, which are primarily technical descriptions of some technology, as well as analyzing other patents, and for the purpose of handling rejections that come back from the patent office. So the patent office will reject patents based on other patent filings or publications that are out there. And so it's a lot of technical analysis. Um, and of course, there's a legal analysis that goes along with it as well. So part of it is what is technically different about this technology versus this other technology. That's kind of the technical side of things. And then the legal side of things is if you recognize those differences, well, under the law, what makes something patentable or not patentable, what makes a rejection proper or not proper. And so it's partly writing a lot of technical descriptions and partly writing legal arguments. And so there's a lot of training going on. At my firm, what I think was common in the big law industry, you end up working with a lot of different partners, as opposed to just having a single boss. And so there's a lot of benefits to that as well as a lot of challenges. The benefits are, of course, that you learn all different styles, you learn different things from different people, and you get to work in different areas on different types of things. The flip side of that is that you learn quickly that uh, partners at a firm can have very different approaches to the same thing, very different styles. And, as a junior person, it often feels basically impossible to give anything to a partner and not have it come back just completely red um, with markups.
Yeah.
And once you think you figured out one person, you give something to someone else and they tell you to do something completely different. So
How do you navigate that as a young associate?
I think you just have to kind of suck it up and realize that, you know, that you definitely can't feel uh, discouraged by the fact that you're going to get back, a ton of markups on everything that you do. Um, and, I think it's probably the case that if one partner handed a document to another partner, um, probably not as much marking up as a junior associate would get, but I can guarantee you that they would still find things to mark up or to suggest doing differently. And so I think that's just kind of the nature of it. And again, going back to kind of what you learned in law school, that there's not always one right or wrong answer to things. But it was certainly something that felt discouraging for a while. Um, and I felt like as you go on and as you get more experience and more senior, I don't know if the markups actually went away so much as at some point the partner just would decide to not review stuff. So I think if they did review it, you'd get the same amount of markups. But at some point, they're just like, okay, you just go ahead with this. We trust you.
Got it. And for folks that are fortunate to have maybe multiple offers from multiple firms when they graduate law school, what are some of the things they should look for when evaluating a firm in terms of things like work-life balance or area of practice?
Yeah. So I didn't have that experience directly because I had started at one firm and, um, you know, got my summer offers there while I was at law school and was working part time. And so the intention to it was always just to go back to the same firm. So I was never really shopping around. But I think there are, a number of things to consider. As far as lifestyle goes, I'm sure there's exceptions. My view of the market, though, is that most of the big law firms are about the same in that respect. Um, in that there's not much lifestyle, no matter how much they tell you that there is. I think the trade-off is much bigger between the bigger firms and smaller firms, where they do operate in many cases much more as lifestyle firms. Um, I've seen big firms, market themselves as lifestyle firms. My firm certainly marketed themselves as a lifestyle firm, and to be honest, I don't think people really felt that way when they were there. Um, so I think that's one of the trade-offs to weigh. Um, some firms, I believe, are more flexible than others in terms of how much exposure you can get in different practice areas if you're not certain what you want to get into. And but at many firms, it becomes pretty rigid pretty quickly. And so, you really have to pick a group, pick a area of focus, and stick with it at many of the big firms. And you can try to move around, but if you're a few years in patent, for example, and then you decide this is not for me, I want to go to the corporate group, you're probably starting over at a first year corporate associate at that point.
Got it. That's awesome. And just for the audience, I mean, you did almost 15 years in big law, so you have a lot of experience with this. Like, how did things change as you progressed at the firm? I mean, I guess how did your work change? Did things get easier? What was that experience like?
Yeah. So some things got easier and some things definitely got harder. I think the things that got easier was that, there is, I think, a very long learning curve as a junior person. Um, Law school just does not prepare you for the day to day stuff that you're doing at a law firm, at least in many practice areas. I think if you're going into litigation, then law school tends to be more aligned with that. But in areas like patent law, I took one patent course in law school, and came nowhere close to preparing anyone for what you're actually doing. And so I think as you progress, those parts of it do get easier. You kind of overcome some of the learning curve. You get to operate a bit more independently, and it's frankly quite nice to get to a point where you can just work directly with a client or draft something and file it without knowing that it has to go to a more senior person for them to scrutinize and tell you everything that you did wrong. Um, so that was a big hurdle that I enjoyed as I got more senior. The challenges that come with getting more senior is it starts to become a lot more about things other than just being a good lawyer. And so I think, as a junior person, you're just trying to learn how to be a good lawyer. And when you get to become more senior, everybody that is still there as an associate at that level has passed that test of being a good lawyer, putting in their hours, mastering the skills. But the challenge starts to become thinking about well, what is the next step for associates, and it's usually thinking about like what is my path to get into the partnership at a big firm. And so it becomes very much about um, things outside of just billing hours and being a good lawyer. It becomes a lot about what is the business case for you as a partner, which can be very tied to, do you have the ability to bring in your own business to the firm, or are you contributing in other ways? Are you contributing to really significantly to training junior associates or developing new um, administrative practices, or adopting new software technology that helps the firm? A whole bunch of non-billable things start coming into play, and there also can start to be a lot more politics about how you get voted into the partnership, or get left out. And in my case, there's also can be many factors that are just completely outside of your control. Um, and so it can depend very much on market factors. You know, is the economy strong? Is your particular sector of the economy strong? And kind of what's happening in your area of expertise. Is that an area that the firm is growing, or that is, you know, staying the same or shrinking? And so, as you know, becoming more senior, it became a lot about, well, what is my path into the partnership? And so that was a huge challenge, and a very different challenge. I kind of learned how to be an engineer, which got me the technical skills. I learned how to be a lawyer. I was not prepared to be a salesman, and go out there and try to bring in business.
Yeah, no, your background is still extremely impressive. And yeah, it's funny because I have, 6 or 7 years of sales experience. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of big law, but I know it's going to be sort of a long road to get there. But before we move on to you starting your own firm, Amsel IP Law, is there anything else you'd like to touch on for folks who are earlier in their careers about your 15 years time in big law?
Yeah, I think you know big law is really great place to start your career and get trained. Um, I think looking back on my experience, I was very hyper focused on staying in big law and making my way into the partnership. And I think I blocked out other potential opportunities that are out there. And there are many opportunities that start to arise as you become more senior. I think again, like it's a great place to be trained, get experience, get the big firm name on your resume. When you get to be around fifth year or sixth year, you start to get really good opportunities many times for going in house at companies, um, transitioning to a smaller firm, which can have uh, different benefits and trade offs, or doing what I eventually did, which was to start my own practice. And so, if I had to do it again, I'm not sure that I would have left big law any earlier, but I certainly would have started thinking about those different paths earlier on, to try to better set myself up for different types of opportunities, and just thinking ahead to what I ultimately wanted to do.
Got it. Super helpful advice. And I'd love to talk about your practice as well as your wife's. Maybe you can talk about both of those and what each one specializes in.
Yeah. So my practice at Amsel IP Law very much aligned with the work that I was doing at my prior firm, focused on intellectual property matters and really specializing on the patent side of that, on patent strategy, prosecution for technology companies. So I work with companies from very early on, a lot of early startups, um, all the way up through some large public companies. And, my main area of practice is everything from initial consultations and strategies around patents, sometimes for new startups that think that maybe they should file a patent but have no idea where they're even starting. Or for larger companies, they have pretty good systems in place, but they need a lot of um, assistance from outside counsel with strategy, drafting patents, and managing rejection from the patent office and the whole process. So, my practice starts with that initial consultation all the way up through when patents get granted from the patent office. That's the majority of my practice. A smaller part of my practice deals with issues that come after patents get granted. So, challenges to patents that come after grant, or sometimes litigation. With litigation, my involvement is usually in conjunction with another attorney or firm that manages the litigation side of it. And so, yeah, very focused practice. I don't get too far outside of the box with respect to my own practice.
Yeah.
My wife's practice is interesting in that it's really probably like the complete opposite side of the legal spectrum. And so she was a defense attorney for the insurance industry dealing with vehicle accidents for many years. Um, a few years into after I had started Amsel IP Law, I was having such a great time running my firm and was quite happy with the move that I had made to leave Big Law and to start off my own. Um, that I thought that she should do the same thing, and so it took some arm twisting, but a few years into my practice, she got on board with it. I think she was actually looking around for in the market, put herself in the market for a new firm for a little while, and I had told her, "Well, what if I start a law firm and hire you? Like, would you take that job?" She was like, "Sure." Um, so I had already been through, all of the issues dealing with how to start a law firm, how to operate a law firm, how to deal with finance, operations, all of that stuff. And so once I felt like I had that down pretty well, I offered to do the same for her, and it took off pretty quick. And so she's
Yeah.
been doing that for a year now. But in the process of that, she ended up switching sides from a litigation perspective. So instead of being on the defense side, it is now a plaintiff side personal injury law firm. It's Applewhite firm based here in Austin, Texas, and so I'm very active. I don't get too much into the cases, but I'm very active with managing the operations of that firm as well. And it's quite interesting because it's all contingency based, meaning we don't get paid unless there's a settlement or we win a case, and it's quite different, from an operational perspective than what I did at Big Law or what I do with Amsel IP Law. Um, I feel like a lot more like an investor some days because we're dumping money into cases to cover costs and legal fees, and then you know um, hoping that it pays out as a settlement on the back end. Um, the other really interesting thing about it is the marketing side of it. It's completely different. So, for my practice, very specialized, not much reason to market to kind of the mass public, and pretty much all of my work comes from referral sources, people that I've worked with before, either as clients or other attorneys. A lot of my work comes from corporate attorneys that I've worked with that work with startup companies and they need intellectual property help. Um, but, you know, not a lot of benefit from mass marketing. Whereas with Applewhite Firm, it's 100% mass marketing. It's, anyone who might get into a car accident is potentially your client. And so we're doing very different things. We're, locally sponsoring events. We're investing in Google ads and a whole bunch of stuff, that we're kind of just figuring out along the way as we go, um, which is one of the fun things about running your own show.
Yeah, that's really impressive. It sounds like you've more or less I don't know if mastered is the right word, the operations side of opening your own firm. So I'd love to know, what are some of the challenges that folks overlook when starting their own firm, and is it for everyone, and why or why not?
I think it's definitely not for everyone, um, but it's also not something that should be overlooked by, I think a lot of people, especially in big law, um, right? You get paid really well. You know you got that big bonus coming at the end of the year. Um, and, the way that corporate benefits are structured, people rely on employers for health insurance and things like that. It makes it very hard for people to leave, and it just feels very risky. And so this is something that I really struggled with when I was at Big Law and thinking about going off my own, was just, how am I going to do all of this? Um, and my process, it sounds simple now that I've done it. But kind of for me, kind of getting over that hump, what I ended up doing was at some point, I just decided, well, I'm just going to write down all of the things that I think that I would need to do in order to be able to, leave my comfortable um, place as an employee and start my own firm. So, I was like, well, I need to figure out docketing. I need to figure out how I'm going to do accounting. I need to figure out, um, a website. I need to figure out how I'm going to uh, get clients. I need to figure out liability insurance, right? All of these things. So I wrote this giant list, and over the course of probably 6 months, I spend a little time on it here and there, and I would just slowly check one thing off, and say, okay, I know how I'm going to do this. I know where I'm going to get liability insurance. I know, who I'm going to hire to do a website. And I distinctly remember the moment where I looked at my list and it was done. Like everything was complete. And I was like, oh, well, now what? And
Wow.
so, that took another probably month or two to just kind of sit on it. Um, and, my wife gave me quite a big nudge on that, but eventually was like, okay, you're like, I guess I'm going to do it. Um, and so, that's kind of how I started off. A ton of operational stuff to learn along the way, though. Um, you know, and there's different ways of going about it. You know, there's always questions for me about, like, do I want to outsource stuff? Do I want to hire an accounting firm? Do I want to hire administrative staff? Or is it not so
Is
big of a burden, right, where I can do it myself? Or in my case, having being somewhat tech savvy, I've implemented a lot of automations into my operations that really take the place of what used to be administrative staff at Big Law, and that's made things really highly efficient compared to what I was doing before. So that's really helped, and but it is a lot of time. So it's like you're spending a lot of time doing stuff other than doing work for clients that you're getting paid for, but all stuff that eventually leads to more efficiencies and eventually pays off. Um, with Applewhite Firm especially, managing attorney trust accounts is a huge complication, and you'll learn more about this in law school and when you take professional responsibility courses. But there are very strict rules around how you handle any client money that is paid to you in advance. And in a contingency based personal injury situation, what typically happens is insurance companies, when a case settles, the insurance companies pay the money to the law firm, and the law firm is responsible for distributing to clients. Sometimes there's liens that get distributed to medical providers. Sometimes there's multiple firms involved. And so it's becomes a pretty complicated settlement process, and something that you have to be really careful about. Just the sort of thing that we were really bad at it when we first started doing it, and now I think we're pretty good at it. But it took quite a while to get there.
Got it. That's awesome. Cool, Jason. I'd love to wrap by maybe talking more about your firm and understanding what differentiates your firm from other ones. You talk on your website about taking a holistic approach to understanding a client's business. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think for me it's really important that I'm at the end of the day providing value to my clients, which seems simple and of course, but it can often be overlooked, especially in the patent world. What often happens in the patent world is, an initial inquiry to me will be, I came up with this invention that I think is really unique. Can I get a patent on it? And usually my first question is why? I want to understand, before I even go down that path, I want to understand, what is your business? How are you planning on making money? What is the current state of the business? Are you a bootstrap startup? Are you, a venture backed startup? Are you a big public company? And what is your core business? What differentiates you from the competition from a technology perspective? And really making sure that the patent strategy that we take aligns with the business goals. And it should always be a the business strategy comes first, and the patent strategy should fit into that. And so when I talk about having a holistic approach, I'm really taking a step back from just thinking about, is this patentable and can we get a patent on it, to thinking about, what is the purpose of this? Why? How is it adding value to the company? Should the patent strategy focus on this technology or some other technology? And very often, either is a patent the right tool for that, or should we think about trade secrets? Should we think about trademarks, copyrights, or many other types of strategies that could go into um, a more holistic approach to intellectual property?
Amazing. Sounds like you take a highly consultative approach and you leverage a lot of your previous experience as well. So that's awesome. I guess Jason, anything else you'd like to share looking back on your career and starting your firm? Is there any sort of anecdotes or broad advice you'd like to share for early attorneys who are, I guess, early in their careers?
Yeah, and I'd go back even before early in their careers to the law school days. Um, in my view, and this is something that I did not really figure out until much later in my career, and I wish I had figured it out earlier. In my view, the most important thing that you will get out of law school is the connections that you will make with your law school peers. And similarly, as a junior person at a law firm, of course, it's important to become a better attorney and absorb all the knowledge you can, and learn from everyone. But your peers will be highly important to you later in your legal career. And this is something that I sort of missed, I think, early on, um, and that I wish that I had paid more attention to, or understood better early in my career. That you know, at this point in my career, running my own firm and developing my own business, and um, relying on bringing in my own clients, or similarly, if you're with a any law firm, a small firm or a big firm, and you're relying on bringing in business to your firm, it's those peers from oftentimes early in your career that ended up being really good sources of work later on. So almost all of my work comes from referrals. Sometimes it's from clients that I've worked with in the past, but it's often from colleagues that I worked with at my prior firm that are either still there or went off and started their own firm or moved to a small firm. And for me, it's very often corporate attorneys that I work with that are now at a firm where they don't have a patent practice, and so when their clients have patent needs, they're looking to refer them somewhere. And so that's become highly important, as well as peers from law school. I unfortunately did not do a great job of keeping in contact with them in my immediate years after law school. But luckily, with social media and Facebook and LinkedIn, it's pretty easy to reconnect with people, and so I've reconnected with many of my peers from law school, and I work with them quite frequently. So as a small firm focused on patent work, there's a lot of overlapping issues that come up. Um, my clients need help with a contract, or they need help with a transaction, or maybe they need help with um, open source issues, or all sorts of different things that my firm does not specialize in. And so I frequently work collectively with other small firms to provide those services to our clients, and likewise they're referring those things to me. So my advice for my younger self and anyone out there starting their career is um, make those connections early on, stick with them, and I can guarantee that 5-10 years down the road, those people are going to be in-house places where they have the decisions about where to send the work, um, and they'll be at small firms, or maybe there's opportunities for you to work directly with them, or team up and create partnerships, whatever works. Uh, but very helpful to have those relationships.
Amazing. Really powerful insight to just double down on the networking aspect. This has been wonderful, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And once again, the name of your firm is Amsel IP Law, based out of Austin. Anything else you'd like to share before we end?
I appreciate you having me on and getting the opportunity to do this podcast.
Of course.